Welcome back to Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Lockett.
And this is our last segment of our formatting as the show is now. Next week we will be streaming live on Indiana Talks, which is on the internet at 365 Live, so people can pick us up and listen to us on MP3 format. Our guests today, our guest panelists, are Jeff Cox. Jeff, your blog?
No boxes allowed with dashes in between, .blogspot.com.
And if people want to pre-order your book, it is?
Rising Sun, Falling Skies, the disastrous Java Sea campaign of World War II.
And that's at Amazon?
Yep. And available for pre-order. It will come out next time. Blah, 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 blah.
So you get the money now, people get the book later. Matt?
I do not have a book out, if you were asking. I know some people have written books eons ago, but I have not written a book at all.
Yeah.
Well, but you have a blog.
Yes, I do have a blog. I occasionally update indiezone.blogspot.com. I'm also contribute over at indiepolitics.org, and of course the show that we're watching right now.
Well, no, you're not watching it. You're a part of it.
I'm part of it.
Yeah.
Well,
semantics.
Well, it's not semantics.
Anyways, back to the physical.
We're talking about
real quick. I hear lots of people talking about cutting unemployment and cutting farm subsidies and cutting everything that's basically in Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, and defense. And I think if we continue on that path, if you cut the SNAP program completely, that saves $76 million a year. That still leaves in a $1 trillion deficit annually. A whole SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, food stamps.
Okay.
If you go only cut that saves $76 million, and you still are left with a good chunk of $1 trillion left in the deficit.
Whereas if you carve out a really nice hefty hunk of unnecessary spending in military, then you can.
Well, it's not just unnecessary spending in military. You could reform Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid in ways that won't harm deliverance to people who benefit from those programs.
Yeah, but we have 12 aircraft carriers. The next most populated fleet of aircraft carriers in the world is one.
Yeah, if you cut defense by so much, then you're going to hurt jobs in Virginia and on the coast and in San Diego.
You realize that people in the world want to kill us?
Not as much as we've apparently wanted to kill them, Jeff.
You really need to read up on history, Mark.
I've read up on history. That's why I can say that safely.
Not nearly enough.
Now, if we go to other big events of this, I mean, the fiscal cliff, either it's going to happen. The senators.
I think it's overrated. I think if taxes do go up, it's not going to be the huge lighting our hair on fire like everyone thinks it is. I think you can from what I've
make it
you can retroactively adjust the tax rates. It's not like anybody making over $150,000 a year will have to pay $13,000 January 3rd, starting right that moment.
Yeah, it's just.
Well, and it's also a bad political move on the part of the Republicans. It just looks like they're sticking up for the rich and no one else.
Other events that happened during the year: Hurricane Sandy hit the East Coast. There was another aspect of the political campaign where I think President Obama benefited from looking presidential. Mitt Romney couldn't do anything, but didn't do anything except purchase canned food in Dayton, Ohio, to give it back to people so they could donate it and he could ship it to the East Coast.
Well, if we want to talk about political ramifications of Sandy, I think that really hurt Michael Bloomberg of anybody involved directly, because if you look at his approval ratings, they're pretty bad right now. And if when Bloomberg talks about what he looks for in a president, it's obvious he thinks he's the best president that could possibly ever be. And he did not do well in the Sandy response.
The government response, whether it was federal or whether it was New York City, was very, very poor. The federal response was worse than it was under Katrina.
No, I don't.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
No, I don't think you can say that. I don't think anybody with a rational mind, Jeff. I'm sorry. That's where I have to part company with you, because I think Katrina was total disaster. You had New Orleans entirely flooded out.
Katrina was a total disaster because of the first responders, which isn't the national government. It was the local and state people. It was the city of New Orleans mayor.
Also, it was a disaster because the Army Corps of Engineers hadn't properly built the levees. It was a whole cluster.
And that is
a lot of people didn't follow the mandatory evacuation order.
They couldn't afford to leave that city, Matt. They were poor people.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but the problem is that we have overhyped weather forecasts all the time. This
that's
latest
true.
snowstorm here is an
blizzard.
example of it. They're calling it a worst blizzard in 20 years. We got 5 inches. My Firebird could have gotten out
Yeah,
in this
I
if
know.
it wanted
I
to. They were
agree.
calling it Snowmageddon and saying that we'd have to resort to cannibalism to
And just to
survive.
clarify for people, a Firebird is a rear-engine drive car.
Rear-wheel drive car.
Yeah, rear-wheel.
I thought you were going to
Yeah.
clarify the fact we had a storm the day after Christmas, and everyone's saying a blizzard, and we got I thought it was 5 inches. They said
Yeah.
7.5.
Well, that's what they got at the
windy.
airport, but it was windy, but I don't think I even got 5 inches at my house. It was more
No.
like 3.
But here's my question in
think
terms
it's
of the emergencies. What do we have? And I wrote an open letter to Governor to be Pence saying, what are you going to do in April? Every 20 or 30 years, Indiana gets hit with a wave of tornadoes. The 1965 Palm Sunday tornadoes were all over the Midwest, but hit Indiana really hard. 1974, we got hit in April all across the Midwest. 1949, I think it was, we had killer tornadoes.
We got hit pretty hard a couple of years ago, didn't we? The southern part of the state.
Not southern part of the state got hit hard, but
Well, using the logic of the people who said we shouldn't be rebuilding New Orleans because it's in a vulnerable place, maybe we shouldn't be rebuilding Indiana. Maybe we should all just move because we're occasionally hit by tornadoes.
no. We are occasionally hit. Now Oklahoma, they should just evacuate Oklahoma and just leave that.
Well, the point that I'm trying to make is it doesn't matter where you live. You're going to be vulnerable to some type of natural disaster.
I agree, but my question to Governor Pence in my letter,
Governor-elect Pence.
Yeah, Governor-elect Pence was, are you ready?
This is the Pence fanboy over
I know.
here.
Governor, are you? What happens? I mean, you have stuff lined up so that I thought that in Louisiana they just were caught dead on their feet and didn't know what to do. Do we have an emergency disaster plan for Indiana if we get hit with these tornadoes? Because I think that's one thing that you look at Mayor Hudnut, the '78 blizzard here. He got a lot of votes for that. A mayor in Chicago lost office because that mayor wasn't able to deal with the blizzard that hit up there. When something like that hits, people expect mayors and governors and presidents to do the jobs that they're elected to, and that's make the nuts and bolts things of government work and function.
Well, they have the disaster tornado preparedness plans in place already in Indiana. Those have been in place for years, and they implement them
The
pretty
question is
regularly.
the long term. The whole rebuilding process, which doesn't happen a week or two after the storm. It takes several months.
Yeah, and my
to
old man was
rebuild.
a construction contractor, and it was a very profitable several months.
Right now we have that Sandy bill up in the Congress about the long-term rebuilding of the areas hit by Sandy,
And-
and there's questions about what should be rebuilt and how much is it really cost-effective? Is it worth rebuilding at the federal government level and stuff like that?
It's worth much more than say another aircraft carrier, but
No,
we won't
it's
get
not.
into that. And we covered a couple of weeks ago gun control very very heavily.
Right.
And to ignore Sandy Hook shootings is wrong as a major thing that occurred this year. But we've already discussed that, and so we'll acknowledge that's a big story. Another huge story from Indiana and nationally, and we hadn't talked about this off camera, was Lugar losing in the primary to Mourdock, and then that set up somebody, Donnelly, who presumably wouldn't have been considered seriously against Lugar in the general.
Nah,
See,
he
I don't
would
buy
have.
that. I think Donnelly.
Donnelly was a good candidate.
I think
was
he
a
might have
great
been a
candidate.
good candidate, but I don't think he would have beaten Lugar.
I mean, if you
Yeah.
look at the other Democrats that as Jeff said earlier, the Attorney General, who was virtually uncontested, got 55% of the vote. You had Glenda Ritz beat out Tony Bennett. You
That's a
had
big
John Gregg getting more votes than honestly anybody expected. He thought he would get.
If he only had
It
one
wasn't
of those
as bad as
goofy
a
ads.
Democratic
Yeah.
year
Yeah.
as everyone thought it would be in India as far as statewide elections go. Joe Donnelly could have put up a good race against Lugar.
And those same issues Murdoch hammered Lugar on. A lot of those would have been available in the general election.
Big story this year was Penn State and Joe Paterno passing away in light of all, and they took down his statue. I mean, that was kind of. Then Obamacare winning at the Supreme Court, that was huge.
Partial. It didn't
Well,
win across the board.
It won 90%. I mean, the only thing that was really limited was the Medicaid stuff. That the federal government can't yank your entire Medicaid funding if
And,
you
of,
don't
and of
expand.
course, we can't really discuss it
Opt out.
because,
Yeah.
because of Indiana's stupid rules on attorneys commenting on court decisions.
Yeah, well,
No, actually, you can do that on the U.S. Supreme Court. I think it's just.
Yeah.
I think.
I don't know about that.
The rule is that you can't say anything that you know to be false
or to impugn the character of
the character. It's not so much the rule; it's how it's been interpreted.
Yeah, I think that
maybe a little broader than it should be.
So we'll just leave it at that.
Allegedly.
That was a big issue.
I think it's hilarious that it's very possible that John Roberts wrote both the dissenting and majority opinion. I think that's pretty funny.
Yeah, that was fun.
It's irony. That's a definition of irony. Paul had wanted to mention the national gas boom or natural gas.
I think that's a story, a huge story. In fact, natural gas prices have gone way down. Affecting that one plant out, was it down south, where we locked into very high rates?
Yes.
And
the court just ruled. The court just ruled that the company.
Actually, that was a different plant. I think.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, there's also the oil boom in the U.S.
Yeah, oil.
Which is no thanks to Obama.
We're the number. It happened during his administration. We're the number one
on private land because he's blocked it on the public land.
He didn't.
And he's trying to block it on private land.
We're the number one oil exporter in the world. One thing that I don't understand is how is it that they're building windmills up? They're building them right now in Howard and Grant County, Kokomo, Marion, all these big windmills to generate energy. But foreign companies are building them, and we're not getting the electricity. That should be Northern Indiana Power or Public. Whatever,
Public Service Company.
NIPSCO should be building it, or IPL should be building those, so that they're getting energy in here, and so we pay cheaper rates.
Well, they contract out to who builds their plants. I mean, they don't build the plants themselves. They have people build them.
Well, and see,
they have construction companies do it. They're not construction companies.
One definition of socialism is that the government owns the utilities, and in this instance, I think if the government said, okay, here's some money, let's build some windmills, and that way we can have really cheap electricity. Hey, Paul, you could buy an electric car, plug it in at home, and if you had virtually free electricity, you just charge that puppy up and then go out driving around. You wouldn't have to worry about gas.
Government subsidizing.
Except electric cars don't last very long.
Also, the Prius
charges, the batteries
don't
work.
Our technology would develop, and
they've said that for 30 years. It hasn't developed.
Well, it has. You've got a
when I was a kid, we all thought the Jetsons reality would be like now. We all thought we'd be in flying cars.
Well, when I was a kid, I thought the Cubs would have won the World Series by now. They've got Teslas. Yes. Teslas perform as well as Ferraris almost, and those are electric cars.
Yeah, except when the battery goes out, you have to basically replace the whole car.
Well, if you're paying $300,000
years,
for a car, you can afford.
Yeah, no, Tesla's it's a beautiful car, but
you would have
the last point that I want to make is on gerrymandering. Just a short view. I know gerrymandering has been with us since the 1700s, but I think this year we saw a greater effect of it because of the way in which Republicans controlled state legislatures.
And we talked about this off air. I don't think it's the same every 10 years. I don't see any difference.
This is the end of the show. You will see us in our the form into which we are evolving next week. We'll be live streaming Civil Discourse Now, huh?
Just like a Pokemon, it evolves.
Or just like what are they? A Dalek on Doctor Who. I watched Doctor Who as a Whoey. We'll be on Indiana Talks next week. We'll be live streaming. Our guests this week have been Jeff Cox and Matt Stone. Thanks very much for being on. It's been the Year in Review. Paul, see you next week.
See you next year, Mark.
See you next year, yes. Take care. See you then.